Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Arrow, as well as the latest episode of Legends of Tomorrow. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I could have time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Arrow, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Legends of Tomorrow. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Arrow. A lot of crazy things went down in this episode, so let's break everything down. First of all, Oliver, hey, he's got a little more free reign of level 2, so that's interesting. And it turns out it was completely wrong, because I was thinking the way Dr. Parker was handling things, which it turns out, yeah, he was a douchebag anyway, so that wasn't too much of a surprise, like the way he was kind of approaching things. It's like, yeah, the way he's kind of like forcing drugs on you like that and stuff like that, you can kind of tell that was a little suspect. But turns out he's not the demon. Lo and behold, who is the demon that's behind all of this? None other than Talia herself. It's like, of course, her father being the demon head, of course she'd be the demon. And it's like, of course. It just, I don't feel like you would have really, I don't know, maybe someone put that together. I wouldn't have even, it would never cross my mind to think Talia. I would have expected it to be Parker because of all the experiments he's performing and stuff like that. I thought that's what gave him the name, but it's like, no. It's Talia. I love the little note. Because Oliver's like, how'd you even get here? She's like, well, I survived Leah and you, which that's another aspect to this too. It's like, we haven't seen her since season 5's finale. I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, we weren't sure what her fate was. And I was like, hey, she's still alive. But the whole thing is, the fact is that she had a run-in with a certain foe in Gotham. I'm like, hey, potentially that. I mean, that could be anyone. Which kind of made me think, because I forgot, I don't remember if I looked it up. I don't think she's in Gotham, but Batwoman, I'm pretty sure she's not in Gotham. I'm sure that is supposed to hint at Batman, which is interesting considering the fact that Talia and Batman have a kid, Damian Wayne, which is interesting. That's why I'm like, okay, so I don't know. That's just kind of interesting. Obviously, this hasn't led to that, which makes you wonder, how does that happen? I mean, that might not happen in this world anymore, because not unless Bruce has some connection to the, League of Assassins / Shadows, like, he would have to have a pre-connection to that to, eventually lead to the whole him and Talia thing. But the fact is that didn't happen, means that probably would never get the whole Damian Wayne type of thing in this, which, that's a whole thing in itself, especially because considering the fact that the Titans is a show now too, which even that's kind of spoilers. But it's just, this is something that came out before the show even came up too, was like the fact is they're Robin-wise, they're at Jason Todd, but obviously that's his own thing. I'm not about to get into that, but I was like, wow, Talia popping up again, that is crazy. She wants Oliver's help to get out of this place, which is, because it's interesting, because Oliver's under the impression it's like, no, like, Parker is trying to help people here, which, like, Talia's like, no, he's here to destroy people, not fix them, which in his own warped mind he is that thing of like, oh, I'm thinking I'm doing good, I'm doing stuff for the greater good. Like, he's willing to kind of push things because he's thinking like in the long run it's going to help society, because the fact of the matter is, oh, using Oliver for example, oh, you're filled with this cycle of violence and stuff like that, so I'm trying to get rid of that. The world will be a better place. He's kind of on that level of things, which is interesting because it led to so many interesting conversations with Talia, because like Talia basically was kind of like, I need your help, and Oliver's like, really? The last time we saw each other, you helped Adrian Chase, and because of that, my son's mother is dead. But at the same time, it's like, well, because of what you now know what my family went through because you killed my father, and now because like the fact is, me feeling the way I do about you, the fact is that I'm coming to you for help speaks volumes in itself, which is so interesting. Like, because like that whole dynamic between them, it's like, yeah, because Talia is the one who basically set him on his path with the list and everything, and it's like, for him, it's kind of like, you helped make me into the monster that I am. Because, like, for her, it's kind of like you've become weak because you refuse to separate, because you were supposed to keep the monster and the man separated, but now you've made them one and it's made you weak. Even the fact is that Oliver's willing to help everyone in there. It's like, oh, she's even like, these are criminals. It's like, yeah, but even they don't deserve to be treated like they're nothing and they're insignificant, that they can just be experimented on and just killed like it's nothing, Even though that's not what they're going out of their way to do, the fact of the matter is they're killing prisoners and just acting like it's nothing speaks volumes all on its own. So that whole level 2 situation was pretty interesting, especially when like Talia and Oliver kind of got their breakout, which I do appreciate that line of like Oliver being like, the fact of the matter is, my father kept secrets and he pushed people away. I made that mistake. And it's like, yeah, you did make it. You did kind of repeat that cycle. But he's kind of like, if I'm going to break that cycle of violence, it's going to be on my terms, not by your way. Because his way is erasing who you are. Kind of like give amnesia more and more. I mean, to be fair, it makes you wonder on some level, is there any parts of Oliver's memory that have been tampered with? I mean, to be fair, he didn't go through enough of the trial, the experiments for it to be, I think, long-lasting effects, but it makes you wonder if there are any effects at all. Either way, getting back to it, that scene in the hallway was pretty dope. You know, you can't help but make a comparison because I just can't help but think about it. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Daredevil, but it's pretty badass seeing Oliver and Talia. I love them walking down the hall, and she's like, "Oh, do you think they realize that they're outmatched?" And then Oliver's like, "They're about to find out." I'm like, "Yo!" That was pretty dope. Even the little teamwork there too. It's like, that was pretty sick. Former allies turned enemies, now turned allies again. And I was so curious what Oliver was about to do. I was like, oh my god, we're about to have like an Oliver and Talia on the run type of situation. That's what I was kind of thinking. I was like, oh man, that'd be kind of dope. But then Oliver's like, no, because if I escape, all I'm going to do is end up being a fugitive, and I can't do that to my family. So he entrusted all of this to Talia, which I'm wondering what they're going to do with the whole Talia situation now that she's all free and everything. Especially considering the fact is, like, we know that Nissa's off handling the whole, like, situation she left last season with Thea and Rory to handle. Rory and Roy's are messing me up, but Roy, which is interesting considering the fact that Roy is back in the storyline. You'd assume that tangentially connects to Nyssa, considering the fact is that he was with her and Thea, which that's a conversation, at least the Thea angle, he's not really willing to talk about in the future, so there's that. But it does beg the question about Nyssa. That's another thing, too, about the whole Talia thing. It's kind of like, man, you were the only one that's that hurt about your dad. I mean, Anissa was, if I remember correctly, she was bothered by it, but then she kind of got over it. To be fair, she didn't have the closest relationship to their father like Talia did, which even Talia didn't have a close relationship with their father because she was away for so long. And didn't he banish her? Wasn't that the whole deal, if I remember correctly? Either way, it's just kind of interesting in the long run because it's like, oh yeah, because wouldn't it not reveal that Talia, like, Oliver didn't find out that Raish was her dad until, like, she popped up in season 5, and it's like, wait, you're helping? Oh, wait, your dad was Ra's al Ghul? Because it's interesting, because even Oliver was like, yeah, I was so focused on what he was trying to do to my city, I wasn't willing to think about the effects of, like, oh, what this might mean for his family. I'm like I said, because this is kind of cool with Oliver, so it's kind of like, it never really crossed your mind to think everything was 100% bad, but still, because I'm sure even Oliver would be like, yeah, considering everything that happened with his dad and kind of the path that set him on, is kind of like, yeah, he can completely understand, like, family be the driving force behind your actions and all of that. I also love the conversation of, like, him being like, the fact of the matter is Talia's approach to everything, what she told him all that time ago, was wrong. Trying to give the monster a name, wasn't giving it an identity, wasn't you taming it, it was just you giving it more power. And trying to keep them separated doesn't work either. So I'm curious to see what Oliver does going forward. I mean, I guess at this point in time, I guess it's like a reconciliation of, like, finding his own way forward with this whole situation, his identity as Oliver Queen as well as being Green Arrow. I mean, especially because it's a public knowledge at this point in time, so there's no going back for that. So I get it, it's going to be like, I mean, to be me personally, I don't know too many DC superheroes that are publicly, like, known. Like, obviously the Marvel Cinematic Universe is doing that. Even the Marvel comics don't really do that too much. There's, like, select few people who know, but to the extent, I mean, to be fair, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I just, like, this is my first experience with, like, a superhero's identity being public knowledge, you know? So that's kind of an interesting thing. So I'm curious to see what they end up doing about that, like how Oliver approaches this and tries to break the cycle of violence that he's kind of been a part of all this time. So we'll kind of see in the long run what happens. And like I said, very interested to see what they do with Talia. It's also sad too because this whole thing is happening and Felicity on many different levels feels bad because she was avoiding Oliver because the last time they talked things weren't that good. Because looking at Oliver's situation just reminded her of the choice that he made, which she super disagrees with, because also he made that choice without her knowledge, without anyone's knowledge. So there's that, but then she's finding out about this Oliver thing, the situation he's on there, and she felt bad because it's like, I didn't visit him. Maybe I could have stopped and maybe I could have prevented all of this. So she kind of held all the weight on like Oliver's situation. She kind of blames herself for not stopping it before him, but Dinah was kind of like, no, that's not on you. Oliver did what he did and you shouldn't blame yourself for it. Which was also kind of nice because we had like Felicity and Laurel and Dinah kind of teaming up together. It's like, yeah, Team Felicity. She's like, I'm working on the name and stuff like that. I even love that moment of Laurel being like, okay, so I'm going to go out for pizza and stuff like that. I mean, do you want to come along or whatever? And Felicity's like, are you asking me out on a friend date? And Laurel's like, no, being awkward about it. I'm like, that's so adorable because she's even like talking multiple times about like, empathy's kind of a new thing for me. I'm working on it. And I love that. That was so good. I love that she's warming up the other characters, in particular Felicity. Didn't see that coming. Even Dinah, which they have their issues, but even Dinah's kind of warming up to her. I'm very interested to see kind of branch out. I mean, to be fair, I guess because she's helping out with this whole Silencer and DS situation. So she even helped out with the whole Oliver thing, trying to talk to like, higher up people to kind of help with this whole Oliver thing. But when it was all said and done, Oliver has returned to level 1. So it's like, hey, and you get reunited with your sidekick. The fact of the matter is he's not the demon and stuff like that makes me go, oh, okay, so he's not that bad of a... So your sidekick inside, he might be a good guy. Which is interesting because there's his whole case situation. Because we had the whole situation of the information about Parker and all his experiments was kind of a bad look for that prison because like that was super off the books, especially considering all the stuff that Parker was already like connected to, all the case files that were on him. So they can use that to leverage Oliver's case to get him released. But there's also the situation. I'm wondering, there's probably going to be somebody that tries to fight Oliver on this. I'm curious to see what happens in that front. But I'm curious, will Oliver actually try and help out his new buddy in prison? It's like, no, help his case instead of mine. That's what I'm kind of inkling because like we see Oliver is kind of going down that path. I mean, he's always cared about people, but I think he's pushing that even forward even more in this case because like his buddy's been there to help him through all of this. So, and he also learned from his buddy that Felicity's closing in on Diaz, which he doesn't like because it's like, yeah, that works out for him. It's like, oh yeah, remove Diaz from the picture. That's okay. But for him, it's like he doesn't want Felicity mixed up in this because she could get hurt or killed. So it's kind of like, that side of things. So, well, another interesting thing about this episode is we had an Argus mission, and that led to Curtis going undercover and stuff like that, which Curtis is like, no, I'm not going to do that. Which he does, and he kind of does a job well, but then it's like, oh yeah, the guy connected to it wasn't there, so we have to kind of keep going with it, which Curtis decided he didn't want to. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. For him, it's like, oh yeah, because I think out of anybody, I think Curtis is the one who embraces the whole like non-vigilante life a lot more than anyone else. I think Dinah does. I mean, I still, I feel like, because everyone else kind of feels the tug a little bit. I think even John does. I still think Curtis and Dinah are the ones who kind of, Dinah has her own reasons for it because she wants, the police, the SCPD kind of be seeing it as like, oh, you can still trust them. They're the answer in a lot of the regards. Whereas Curtis said his reasonings for it were just because the whole vigilante life, it took a lot from him. Because for him, it's like, look at Oliver. Oliver literally couldn't outrun the consequences of that double life. And the fact of the matter is, this life cost me my marriage. I've gotten hurt. The people I love have gotten hurt because of it. And it just, for him, it's just like, that's why he liked this job, because that's why he didn't want to go back in the field, because it would have meant like going back. Because that's the difference. Because back then, before with Team Arrow, it's like, it's one thing, but to see that it costs Oliver everything, that life, obviously that's not something Curtis wanted to go down, but you kind of see him kind of slip back into it, because like for John, it's kind of like all these aspects of you that you consider just part of Mr. Terrific, you having the PhDs that you do, speaking 6 different languages, being a bronze medal athlete, like the fact in Olympic athlete, the fact of the matter is that's part of you. That's not just part of Mr. Terrific, because Mr. Terrific is you. So which you had Curtis rocking the undercover work, taking down Malcolm before he gets set off the bomb and stuff like that. And I love him being like, yeah, you know, are my legs still there? Because I got so much adrenaline, I can't tell. So, but it also seems like they are diving deeper into the whole thing that Lila talked about, because it's like, yeah, there's something bigger that Argus is keeping secret. So it's like, what that secret is, we don't know. But so far it's introduced this painting, and that painting's important in some shape or form. We've yet to discover its secret. So I'm very interested to see where that whole Argus storyline ends up turning. But I thought that was kind of pretty neat, the whole Curtis storyline. I'm curious to see what they end up doing with him in this regard. Is he going to... I mean, so far, because we've heard about Renee to a small extent from Zoe, but we don't know about Curtis in the future. So, I mean, in that time frame, once again, I'm under the assumption this is like 2049. This might be before 2049 when it comes to Star City. So I don't know, like, you know, because this might be a time frame where John might still be alive, might not. Who knows? We'd have to kind of wait and see in that regard. He might not be, considering him or Lila, considering the fact is, if it ends up being in like, because we don't know when Argus took over things. Maybe they brought that up last season in Legends, but I don't remember. Because in 2044, Argus is kind of running things and kind of locking up metas and people with powers and stuff like that. So who knows how long Argus kind of started kind of policing everything like that. So I feel like it would have to be, I mean, that might be playing into Lila and John's storyline with this whole Argus situation is connected to that future, like whatever's coming up with that, but we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us with all this, especially because it's like, oh yeah, like, I mean, to be fair, it doesn't mean that things aren't, you know, Diaz could still send people after Oliver anyway, even, you know, so being in prison isn't safe, but things are better now. And like I said, he's potentially in a situation to kind of get out of this whole thing. But to me, I'm still thinking his buddy's going to be the one who kind of benefits from the situation. But like I said, we'll kind of have to wait and see in that regard. Also, can't forget the fact of the matter is we had Diaz in Moscow going after Anatoly, which I don't know if he's going to kill Anatoly outright. He's probably going to make him suffer. So I'm curious to see where that happens. It's him on his like little revenge tour. Plus, let's not forget he's all souped up now. So that's definitely going to be interesting going forward. So like I said, we'll just have to wait to see what goes down in the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Legends of Tomorrow. Quite a few things went down in this episode, so let's break everything down. I love the whole beginning where you have Sarah and Ava watching the movie, and they're like, it's a movie called Swamp Thing with 4 A's because that's the 4th movie. Interesting titling. I wonder has something else done that before. Well, there's like a band I know that's done that where it's like there's a whole bunch of E's in the band that's supposed to represent like the 10 members that are part of it because it's kind of like a combination of two, but it's a whole thing. I'm not going to get into it, but that's my own experience with that. And I was like, oh, is this supposed to be like a little wink and a nod to Swamp Thing? Is that what I was like? Oh, I mean, which they totally admit because John's kind of like, actually, I know a Swamp Thing, but Maine's too far up for him to go. I'm like, hey, they're establishing Swamp Thing is in this universe. Because I was about to say, I was like, that's kind of interesting because they're making these references. Like Sarah and Ava were having a conversation early on. I was like, oh, isn't Swamp Thing part of the DC universe? Which he is. Because I was like, in particular, he's part of the Justice League Dark with Constantine. So I was kind of like, oh, that's pretty dope. Just a little side note of establishing that he exists in this universe. Whether we see him or not, that's a whole other question. But the fact is they kind of acknowledge his existence is pretty dope in itself. So makes you wonder like what their paths have been like crossing in the past, Constantine and Swamp Things. But nevertheless, we have the team going to the 90s, in particular camp. We had Chad and Ray hitting it off. I thought that was pretty dope because it's just like, hey, because Ray really embraces this whole camp stuff. It really surprised me that Sarah did too. I also appreciate that Ava comes along too, just because it's like, hey, Nate, you know, and Gary are running thing at the Time Bureau, which is kind of like, oh, we're leaving those two knuckleheads in charge. Interesting. But the fact of the matter is, this is also an excuse for Sarah and Ava to spend more time together. And I love the dynamic of like Sarah trying to be like, yeah, oh, cool with the counselor. I mean, as a counselor with the kids and stuff like that, trying to be the cool, like fun person, which is interesting because I never expected Sarah to be like super into camping and stuff like that. Like camps like that. I wasn't expecting her to be super into it because Sarah always seemed like, oh, she's like, I'm so cool, I don't realize I'm cool. So I thought she'd be kind of like super against that, but it's like, no, she was super into it. But then you have Ava being strict and stuff like that. It's like, oh kids, you don't give me the information you want, you're not going to get any ice cream. And if you ever, it's like, but it's the whole ice cream thing starts at 5 minutes, and it's like, oh, so you better hurry, or you're gonna be scraping the bottom of the barrel just to get some ice cream. I'm like, whoa, Ava goes hard. It's being like blowing the whistles, like, get to your bed. It's not even nighttime yet. Well, close your eyes, and you can pretend like it is or something. It's like, oh, it's so good. And at the same time, we have the pairing of Ray and Constantine. Ray kind of being kind of the bubbly personality that he is, very much nicely clashes with, you know, pessimism that is John Constantine. So I thought that was kind of pretty dope. It is kind of interesting though, just because I think out of anyone, Ray's probably going, I mean, obviously because Nate's not around, so it's interesting because like what he always, the people he kind of like buddies up with, because obviously kind of saw at the beginning with obviously Mick, then eventually him and Nate, because him and Nate are kind of on the same wavelength, and now him and John. It's this different dynamic that he plays with a lot of the characters that I thought was kind of interesting, especially when it comes to this whole John situation. Well, it led to an interesting conversation where John was kind of like, don't get close to me or someone like Nora Dark. People who've been that close to a demon, like, it will mess up people like you. So save yourself, because it's like getting mixed up into supernatural stuff. Like, someone like you could definitely end up getting hurt. It's not something you should. Yeah, you might have saved the world and stuff like that. You might have fought enemies and bad guys and stuff like that, but these supernatural creatures are on a whole nother level of vicious. So that was kind of like I said, it was just kind of interesting, because it's like, you know, Constantine pushes people away because that's his way of trying to protect them. I'm sure that's something him and Oliver kind of have in common, which I think is kind of interesting. I mean, to be fair, a lot of people have kind of had that. I think Sarah's had that too, where she pushes people away because of that same reason. So. But, yeah, I love, sadly, that Ava got tricked by the kids. Like, they're like, oh, yeah, the whole lake monster thing. And it's like, oh, because of this, some counselor and stuff like that. I'm like, wait, aren't you literally saying the plot of Friday the 13th? Like, I could have sworn that was kind of what that was hinting at. And I figured it was a trick and everything, but the girls were so sincere. I'm like, yeah, it's definitely a trick. And now they're calling Ava a lake monster behind her back. And she's like, those little girls are monsters. What I thought was kind of interesting too behind this whole situation, obviously, like, it's something Sarah never thought about the entire time, because I kind of let it slip my mind too a little bit, because like, all right, Ava never had a childhood, so all this fun memories that Sarah is sharing and stuff like that about, like, oh yeah, going to camp and stuff like that, it's like Ava never had that opportunity because her memories are lies. She's a clone, which is interesting, because I didn't even think about this, because obviously, like, it's such a stupid thing in my head that connect, but like, obviously, like, you know, in Arrow, Curtis had made that comment of like, oh, get a clone of me, which is just funny because Ava's actually a clone in Legends, which is fine. It's just a stupid connection. There's no point of drawing like parallels to, but it's just like in my head, I just think it's funny to think about. Nevertheless, it's just a whole stupid tangent right there. I do apologize. But yeah, Ava never really had a childhood, and you know, Sarah kind of feels like a dick because it's like, oh man, I'm kind of rubbing this in her face, and she never had a chance to have one. Of course, she wouldn't know like what it's like to kind of have fun as a kid and stuff like that. I even love that Ava's kind of like, I'm so kind of not normal that the fact of the matter is I keep a photo of that two actors who played my parents just so I can feel somewhat normal. I'm like, wow, that is sad. That's so heartbreaking that you have to do that. I mean, but that's something interesting because I talked that before because the actress who plays Ava and the actor, you know, who plays Constantine were talking about their characters this season, and I think that they had talked. The actress who plays Ava had talked about how like they're probably diving into that more because like we have a full season dedicated to her still dealing with the truth is that she isn't a human, that she's a clone, you know? Not only are you not a human, you're actually one of many people, and just every aspect of your life is fabricated, and what it means to kind of be a, you know, a person, you know, to truly exist, and when everything about you isn't you. And it's like, you know, because she dealt with that a little last season, but I think we're going to deal even heavier with it this season, which I'm very excited to see kind of how that what that ends up turning into with all of this. So Sarah and Ava turn into kids and stuff like that. And I love Ava when she was like, you know, Sarah being like, yeah, being the fun one and stuff like that. And Ava was like, yeah, I got kicked out of the, like, you know, camp because I was reading. after dark. They're like, oh, lame. And Sarah's trying back. No, reading what they thought she was doing, but really she was reading love letters from her boyfriend who lives in France and stuff. Like, ooh, I just love those little bits. And then it's kind of like, oh yeah, we got, they were talking about Ava got her super good with that, the lake beast and everything. And she's like, yeah, you got, oh, that was super funny. Except she could have fallen in the water was funny and everything, but she could have gotten, pneumonia, and that's a serious thing, and she kind of kills the vibe a little bit. I'm like, that's so good, I love it. But the whole aspect is the supernatural creature this time is the Striga, which is apparently a vampire-like witch that sucks on the youth of children, and has been like snatching up kids from all of this. I can't forget, I almost let it slip my mind. I wanted to make sure I didn't forget, was Constantine trying to hypnotize the kids. He talked to one of the kids, and the kid was kind of like, yeah, Zach talked about getting to first base, and it's like, it's nighttime, why would you be playing baseball? And John rolls his eyes. I'm like, that's so adorable. That's where your mind goes. It's like the innocence of children, dude. That's so adorable. I even love that Constantine in the beginning, because Sarah's like, no, Ty. He's like, what? No, you gotta fine. He's like, I'm only doing this once, and it's only for the kids. It's kind of like, I just thought that was kind of pretty neat. It never correlated in my head until Constantine, until just sitting here right now. It's like, okay, that's why Constantine's even more so kind of delicate when it comes to the kids, because he's not delicate with most people, but he is with the kids, because it's like, all right, because of his experience. He actually references it around Ray, but I don't think Ray really caught it, because Constantine was like, I'm not going to lose another kid. So it's like, yeah. So he ended up, I guess, performing a spell that kind of gave a bit of his own life force to the kid or something, but sadly it puts him in a condition where he's kind of like nearing death's door because of it. So, but to kind of, circle back around to what I was bringing up before, the whole Striga situation, I love that it's kind of like, oh, it must be Paula, and then they throw cayenne pepper in her face and knock her out, and it's like, oh, it's not her, it's actually Chad, which is like, oh man, that's such a bummer. Part of me was wondering about that, because I was like, it's going to be Chad, isn't it? It's like, no, I guess it's Paula, because she's out there being creepy. I'm like, oh, I'm going to punish the kids. It's like, you're acting, kind of looked a little scary at that moment, but I guess that was the point. What was interesting, though, is the double team of Ava and Sarah. Even as kids, they killed it, dude. I loved it. Grabbing Sarah, flipping her over the Striga, Ava sweeping the legs, Sarah coming down with a stab. I'm like, yeah, that was super dope, dude. That was so cool. I also like the Striga's actual appearance of what it looks like. Looks kind of like a vampiric zombie or something like that. Kind of its appearance. I thought that was kind of interesting. So in the end, everything was resolved. The kids were saved because other kids came because they followed what Ray had said. And it's like, oh, all the stuff he was teaching them early on wasn't kind of misplaced, because it actually helped in the end. So the campers were returned and everything. I guess we're just going to sweep over the whole, the kids knocking Paula out. But to be fair, she didn't know that was Sarah and Ava, so it kind of works out. And I also love that, oh wow, that potion actually worked. It's like, what, you gave us that potion not knowing it worked? He's like, of course, I've never tested it on a human before. It's like, oh, I love you so much, Constantine, you're so good. But what kind of is also interesting with this whole situation is what's happening on the ship, because obviously I love the whole thing of oh, why did you keep the shapeshifter Charlie? And Sarah and Zara kind of look at each other, and Ava's like, oh, obviously you're trying to get intel on the interdimensional prison that they're from. And Sarah and Zara are like, yeah, man, you really figured out what we were up to. Ava, I was like, that's good. I guess they didn't want to admit the fact is they didn't take her away because they didn't want to admit yeah, we got a little sympathetic, her looking like our friend, and that complicating things, and we kind of feeling bad about sending her back, especially because she's not actually a bad person in that regard. So there's that. But what was really interesting is the fact is that we had Rory, which I'll admit, I actually forgot about Mick until he popped up to stop Charlie from leaving. I'm like, all right. I was like, I completely forgot about Mick until he popped up in the episode. It's like, right, because he gets so detached from the mission sometimes. And I'm like, right. And essentially, him and Charlie kind of bond because they've both been in prison and they kind of know what that life's like and about. And I thought that's kind of interesting, bonding over drinks and stuff like that. It seems like that prison was pretty tough because she kind of had to do whatever she could to survive. She'd even shapeshift into the other monsters so that they wouldn't bother her. I was like, man, that's pretty rough. And the fact of the matter is, what helped Mick was kind of like eventually finding a buddy and all of that, and that ended up being Snart. So it's kind of at some point he was kind of like, you have to trust someone. So Mick lets her out. He's kind of like, you don't pay me to be a jailer. And then Sarah's like, I don't pay you at all. What are you talking about? And so we see Charlie in a new getup and everything. It's like, okay, I'm going to help you capture these other supernatural creatures, these mysteries. Like I said, I'm not letting that go. That's super good. I'm so glad. Ray's going to be the only one that keeps up with that. Everyone else is going to be like, oh, these supernatural creatures, these fugitives. But it's like, I've always got to try and remember. I made a promise to myself. I got to keep remembering mysteries. It has to be. It has to exist. But nevertheless, Charlie was kind of like, oh, I'll help you out. But in exchange, you can't ever put me back. And I'm like, that's definitely going to turn into a complicated situation. Because Sarah's probably like, yeah, you're not bad, but you're still gonna have to go back eventually. Maybe Constantine might be the one to kind of push for it, because like, yeah, you might not have done anything bad now, but you still got locked up in here for a reason. But it's like, hey, that's also just because not everything that's locked up in here is terrible, horrible. Charlie's just kind of like the rebellious type, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see that kind of clash with the team, because in a way I'd like it too, because it almost probably kind of represents that Snart side of things too, because like her and Rory are hitting it off, because it's like, oh yeah, which is interesting, because I kind of felt like Ray and Charlie kind of hit it off, but that was kind of like buddy because that was under like false pretenses. Now she's like the rebel that she is, joining up with Nick. I think is going to be a nice dynamic. I'd like to see that kind of meld a little bit more, just because they are kind of like the outcast amongst the outcasts in the group. But even then, it's kind of like, yeah, there's no more divide between hero and villain anymore, because it's just kind of like we're all misfits in this situation. So I'm interested to see how that all plays out. I ultimately get the feeling like they'll let Charlie go in the end. It'll probably be a bumpy road to get to that point, but I think in the end they'll let her go, and probably just like Constantine give her back her ability to shapeshift. That's what I'm thinking, but, like I said, we've got a long road ahead of us in this season, so we'll have to wait and see how it kind of plays out. But I'm very interested, because we're going down the route of, yeah, let's find Nora, where apparently she's working at a, like, almost looks like a Renaissance fair, essentially. And she's like, I'm supposed to be a witch. And he's like, yeah, whatever, be a lusty witch or whatever. It's like, okay. And the fact is, she kind of has like a normal job, and she's kind of like a little bummed about the whole situation. Like, in particular, like, oh, you kind of like demeaning my job a little bit like that. I'm like, whoa. So they got to track down Nora so that she can help Constantine, because she's the only one that can, the only magical person, which it's pretty dope, because I kind of, like I said, I talked about this before, like I knew Nora would play a big part this season, but it's like interesting, because that means she's going to join the team too, so it's kind of like, huh, like I said, like the ranks shrink, and then they kind of fill back out in different regards. So this is like a fun episode. Oh, dude, Legends of Tomorrow is so good. It's so much fun. Like, I mean, it is literally the show with the like heaviest amount of levity, like ever since like more and more each season, but definitely season 3 like hit the ballpark with it, and it's just been keep going ever since. So I'm excited to see what goes down in the next episode with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good